Physical abilities such as strength, speed, agility, endurance, and coordination are fundamental in sports. But mental abilities such as focus, concentration, motivation, confidence, resilience, and decision-making can heavily influence an athlete's performance, especially when it matters the most. If you want the mental edge in sport and life, check out the Max Out Mindset for Volleyball book and workbook or the Max Out Mindset for Softball book and workbook. A guide for coaches, athletes, teams, and parents to help you be in the best position to max out when it matters the most. Go to www.maxoutmindset.com.
You're listening to Max Out Mindset with your host, Dr. Larry Widman, performance psychiatrist and elite mindset coach to women in sports, business, and life.
Welcome to the Max Out Mindset podcast. This is your host, Dr. Larry Widman, sometimes known as Doc in the Mindset World. I've got one of my partners with me, Scott Papik, today, and I would say the reason we do this podcast is because we've really been blessed over the last couple of decades to work with some of the best athletes, coaches, leaders, and teams, and really like to share our wisdom of what we learned from them. And then when we're lucky enough to have a guest on, learn from them as well. And I say my definition of maxing out is given the health, the talent, the experience of the athletes and coaches, the intangibles. Can a team or an individual reach the limits of their capabilities? And then can they do it under pressure when it matters the most? Because we always say, if you can't do it when it matters, what's the point? Obviously, we're very blessed to have a guest on today. He comes to Creighton University of Utah State, where he played there for 3 years. We were lucky to have him at Creighton last year, and he decided to play an extra year again at Creighton University as one of their starting guards. He's highly successful in basketball, and also I think wants to take it to the next level. If anybody watched him play last year, you saw him grow on that journey at Creighton and help them into their Sweet 16 bid and make their run to the championship at a really high level. Welcome, Steven Ashworth, to the Max Out Mindset podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be a part of it and have a great conversation about maxing out.
Yeah, it was really fun to watch your journey last year. Obviously, the transfer portal has changed things. And so, and it's provided opportunities for a lot of athletes and a lot of teams to fill in missing pieces or things that maybe they didn't have in the past, or trying to learn new experiences. You heard my definition of maxing out. When you think about maxing out, what's your definition?
I believe that it's very much so in line with what, I would say you are the expert in this case. And so a lot of what you said, I align with, but in a way, achieving things beyond what you can even imagine with the help of teammates, coaches, sports psychologists, and everything else, really utilizing all of the resources that you can have in your repertoire to become the best potential person and athlete you can be. That's what I see is kind of my definition of maxing out.
I love that, right? That's really what we talk about a lot, was the 4 legs of elite performance, working on the physical, the mental, the technical, the tactical, not just for basketball, but for life, and to maybe do things that either you didn't imagine yourself, or I know for sure this is true, although you haven't spoken it necessarily. I'm sure there's been a lot of doubters your entire life. You're not a 6'4" shooting guard, right? I don't know your exact height, but you're a little bit undersized in the Division I world, but probably your whole life you've been doubted to some degree. Is that accurate? And how have you used that?
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that, to where personally, if I listened to and believed everything that was said about me, I don't believe I would be here today. I think that when I hear things like that, whether it's the doubters or the haters or the naysayers, in a way, it's fueled me in a way to just share with them that, I think you're wrong. And I don't really have to say it with word, but more so by action. And an athlete in the Division I world that is either undersized or in some ways you maybe say undergifted athletically, it really requires a lot of attention to detail and a lot of time spent in things and areas where maybe other people don't even have to spend their time. And so I have been doubted, and I think that that's been one of my greatest attributes, honestly, in becoming an individual who can be a part of winning and successful programs, is learning all of those little things that a player needs to do to help his team win.
I love that. So what are you doing that others won't do or don't do?
I like to think in my role as a point guard on the floor, you're really, in a way, put into a leadership position, whether you are a natural leader or not, because you're bringing the ball up the floor. You're at the point of the offense and the point of the defense. And so the communication and commands often come through you. And so I think that my ability to communicate clearly and effectively with my teammates is something that has put me in a position to where my teammates can trust me and understand me as well as my coaches. And that gives you more opportunity and more experience where other players that maybe aren't communicating at that high level can't be trusted, not because they're not talented or gifted enough to do it, but because you don't have the consistency on the court to know that when the time comes and what you said, when it matters most, you can trust that individual. And so I think all of that, the communication pieces, some of the nitty gritty plays lead to just more trust. And as you're competing in team sports, you can't undermine how important trust is.
God, I love that. Trust is such a big word for us. It's so hard to get and it's pretty easy to break, but it does require communication and showing your teammates that you're gritty and you'll go for every ball and that you'll communicate at a high level. So backtrack just a touch. Um, when did you figure out like, hey, I'm pretty good at this thing called basketball and I could actually make a career out of it, get a scholarship to play at college and maybe beyond? When did you figure that out?
It was probably, I mean, I remember really loving basketball when I was in kindergarten was the first time that it was just the sport that I always looked forward to, the games I was always excited about. I wanted my neighbors to come to the game and, all my friends and family. And so it was something that I fell in love with at a young age. But I probably would say that one of my first workouts with Marty Hawes, who was a BYU legend, who then had sons Tyler and TJ play at BYU. I worked out with them when I was maybe in fifth or sixth grade, and Tyler was in college at this point, and TJ was on his way to being an All-American high school guard, and then in college as well. And Marty was pushing me to guard those guys and compete with them in one-on-one drills or shooting drills. And I was nowhere near their level, but at the same time, I could see that vision of the work they put in and where they got. And I understood that, hey, if I do that same thing, I can get to where those guys are and I can be like them. And it was something that, it's obviously a great testament to them that they're great role models off the court as well. And so it was easy for a kid like myself to want to be like them. And I think I just tried to do everything I could to be as successful as they were on the court. And I think that work ethic and those competitions early on in fourth, fifth, sixth grade really inspired me as a young athlete and helped keep me going when things got, tougher down the road.
Were you wired for work ethic and grittiness, or did you develop and learn that?
I think in a way, I was wired that way. I've talked a lot about, with my dad, actually, my life has changed pretty drastically. And I know we might touch on it a little bit later, but I've become a father myself. And so I think you just start having more conversations with your parents about life and things like that. And so we've talked a lot about where I've gotten with basketball and what I also want to do in life. And something stuck out to me that he said, you didn't get to where you're at today because, of any luck or any, tip of the ball. You really got to where you were because of the hard work and work ethic that you put in. And so in life, whatever you want to do next, don't think that you can take shortcuts and get where you want to go in life either. It's going to take that same work ethic. And so I credit my dad a lot with my work ethic because we did have resources to where I could get into the gym in mornings and afternoons and evenings after school. But my dad was never the one to take me. He was never the one to wake me up. He would only take me and wake up with me if I woke him up or if I asked him. And I think that without me ever recognizing it, really put into me the love that I had myself for basketball. And I was never, pressured to go and work out. I was never forced. And so those things I think kind of built in within myself a work ethic that has lasted, now to where I'm in my fifth year of college, still loving to get extra shots up and put in the work.
I loved hearing that your dad made it your journey instead of his journey. Is there anything
Yeah.
else that you could layer on that?
Um, yeah, I mean, my dad was great about my dad grew up playing uh high school basketball in Las Vegas. He had opportunities to go play at Brigham Young, Hawaii, which is Division II school, and he elected not to take that and rather to go to school. And so I could tell that my dad had a love for basketball and his journey that he had with it, but he also in a really good way taught me things about basketball that he knew would help me be successful, but never force them on me, whether it was work ethic, whether it was being a good teammate. Um, and I think that's where a lot of my unselfishness comes in because he talked a lot about how he realized that if he was his teammate, he really wouldn't have liked to play with him. And so he just encouraged me to be a teammate that your teammates enjoy playing with. And so I think it hits home more now than ever because I recognize I have a son and I'm excited for his journey in life and in sports and whether or not he chooses sports is his journey. And I think that it's easier said than done what my dad did for me to make my journey my own um, with not pushing me but encouraging me. And it's a very fine balance as a parent because there may have been times to where my dad absolutely knew that something else would have been a better decision for me to make in a certain moment, but he let me make my decisions, and I think that it allowed me to become comfortable with who I was as an athlete and as a player. And one other story on that was that there was a time that a college basketball player I was at a camp said that they had shot 20,000 shots over that summer. And I was like, oh, I want to do that. If he's doing that, I should do it. And I was in fifth grade. And so I went to my dad and I said, hey, like this summer, I want to shoot 20,000 shots. And my dad's a really good math guy, graduated in computer science. And so he whipped up a little Excel sheet and we had it all planned out to where if I shot, a certain amount of layups and jump shots and threes and different shooting drills every day throughout the summer, I needed to shoot 275 shots for 6 days a week because we would take Sundays off as a rest day and a family day, or I needed to shoot 334 shots every 5 days a week. And we printed this out and I had it on my door at home and I would track all the numbers. And so I'm grateful for my dad and the way that he supported my dreams but never pushed my dreams. And I think that that's something that parents can aspire to be, and it's not easy. I already know it's going to be hard for me to not want to push Tommy to do certain things, but it allowed me to fall in love with the game and really find joy in it. And so I'm pledging today, I guess, to do the same for Tommy that my dad did for me.
Before you got to Creighton, can you think of a time that you sort of had the most discomfort as an athlete, a situation, a moment, a game before you got to Creighton?
Yeah, there was a time where I remember my freshman year going to Utah State. Uh, they had just come off a Mountain West championship, really good program. Uh, Coach Craig Smith, who's now at Utah at the time, was the head coach there. And it was an interesting space because I just served my mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so I'd taken 2 years off of basketball to, serve God and teach people about Jesus Christ. And so I'm coming home to a coaching staff that also didn't recruit me because I'd committed to a coaching staff previously that was no longer there. And I remember stepping into those practices knowing that they really didn't have a spot for me. And it was something that was a little uncomfortable because as an athlete and as an individual, we all want to feel loved and important. We want to feel wanted. And there were just some days where I could feel that some of the other kids that they had recruited, they had built relationships with, and they knew more about them. And it was one of those moments where I think that work ethic really allowed me to overcome those kind of hard days because I knew that, hey, if I kept working at it, there was going to be bright times ahead. And I ended up, starting a few games at the end of that season, as a freshman, averaged over 20 minutes a game and had all the opportunities you could ever want as a freshman. And I think that those things come from people who just never give up and never give in.
Really solid messages, right? But it's hard. It's easier said than done to never give up and never
Yeah.
give. And especially when journeys change, like you said, you went on a full mission, you learn, grow, develop. You were in your spiritual world. You come back, it's a different staff, and then you work through that. What was it about? What was your decision process? What were you looking for at Creighton for an experience? Why didn't you make that change? Because it would have probably been very comfortable to just stay where you were at. And yet we made this change. What was the reason behind that?
Yeah, there was a lot that went into it. I was married at the time, and so it wasn't just my decision that was being made. It was probably one of the first decisions I'd made with Peyton that was really a joint decision and a big decision for our life. We were living in Logan, Utah, close to family. They could come visit anytime they wanted, and now we were making the decision of do we go somewhat across the country and pursue a new dream, a new goal. And I think what we came to was that there's the saying, there's no growth in the comfort zone and no comfort in the growth zone. And at Utah State, I felt like I had progressed my career, had become a new player with new motivation and new goals and dreams and aspirations. And there was an opportunity with coaches leaving and changing to where the transfer portal made sense for me. And so we discussed a lot of the pros and cons, and it really came down to the fact that there was growth that needed to be made for me to play in the NBA, and that was the end goal of my basketball career is to play in the NBA. And Creighton was the spot that fit that I was going to be pushed, I was going to be challenged, playing in arguably the best conference in college basketball. And then I'd be surrounded by great teammates on my visit. We were able to hang out with Ryan and now Rachel Kalkbrenner. They just got married, and just build a relationship with them in a few short hours. And then some of the other teammates that were at the dinners or lunches or meets on a typical visit. And it just felt like a place where I could help them become more successful, but they could also help me become more successful. And that's exactly what our experience has been so far.
What was it about Ryan? This is Ryan Kalkbrenner. He'll be a senior this year on the team. And what was it about him that made you so comfortable in terms of affecting your decision to come here?
Yeah, I wish he would have given me more of a promise that he was coming back, because he was still weighing his NBA opportunities when I had committed. But there was just a comfort level that they had similar values. They had similar things that they would like to do that were fun to them as a couple and as individuals. And then anybody who's met Ryan understands that when you really get to know him, he's got a lot to say and he's really funny and he's just a joy to be around. And so I felt like I could connect with him early on, and that's been the same. My early intuition has been spot on, I'd say.
And his wife, now Rachel, was a high level women's basketball player at Creighton as well, a very successful career. That's really cool. So, and people on the podcast know that I play a relatively small role for Creighton men's basketball, but it'll be my fifth year where I do a little bit for the team, and not a ton, but I do some for the team at times, and work with a few of the athletes as well, whatever coach needs or whatever athletes need. But so obviously I watched you practice at Creighton, and I could see the new kids coming in, and when I do come there and observe, and then getting started, like you said, in a different conference. Although I know Utah State is a highly successful team and very talented team, but like you said, coming into a conference where maybe every single night the competition might have been a little bit more grittier or tougher than the prior conference. But can you talk to me a little bit about the challenge of transitioning to the Big East for you, and when you did experience some discomfort early on in the season at Creighton last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was maybe even a little more than I would have bargained for at times, just with it is a grueling season, a grueling schedule. You play every team in the Big East twice, both home and on the road, to where some conferences you don't. And it's a season full of ups and downs, and I like to think that those that can just stay steady, remain confident, and remain patient was a big word for me. I think is just the patience of understanding that my opportunities will come. Need to stay ready, but I think of probably during the season there was our first big home game I'd say was Iowa, and I'd played Iowa previously in my career before, and so I knew the type of caliber of team they were and everything that came along with it. And I think it being really our first test as a team and me being one of the new additions and pieces of the team, I put in a way unnecessary pressure on myself to perform and to show things that I was capable of, which I think in turn, if anybody searches the box score, which doesn't tell the whole story of what an athlete does on the court, you'll see that I wasn't as effective as I normally am. And so I learned from that really of just I was playing too much of fear. I was thinking a lot about what others thought of me, what the new fan base thought of Steven Ashworth and what he can do for this team. And then the comparison obviously steps in to where you're replacing the shoes of a team that just went to the Elite Eight, and there's those same expectations. And so I think there was two kind of messages after that game that I kind of used that I felt carried me throughout the season. And the first was fearless, just to play fearless. That's what had gotten me here. That's the type of personality I have. I take risks, I take chances. Some people might say I take crazy shots, but in my mind, every shot's a good shot. And so, and that comes with being fearless. And then the second was the reminder that comparison is the thief of all joy. And basketball is something that brings me a lot of joy, and I wasn't quite feeling it, and I recognized that I was trying to compare myself to something that was no longer, and so I needed to just remember to be myself and stop comparing myself to anything, and just play free and have less fear, and I think the season turned around for me. There's still highs and lows throughout it, but overall, I think you look probably after game 8 where my advantages were and where my production was on and off the court, and it was much higher.
I love that. First off, just the vulnerability to say, look, I fell short in that game and here's why, right? And like you said, there's other things we do in a game besides scoring that impact winning, but scorers want to score, right? And so but just the notion that there were some things that you actually had control over that got in your way that you had to then develop some awareness of, right? Which you mentioned, fear and comparison. You articulated them both well, the costs of fear and the cost of comparison. Did you come up with any strategies to combat fear and comparison other than just having an awareness that that's not you, that helped you be more mindful of it going forward?
Yeah, I think throughout the game, for a while there, I would actually I'd tape my wrist, my left wrist, and I would write fearless on my wrist, as kind of a grounding exercise throughout the game, throughout warm-ups even, to just kind of remind myself whenever I felt maybe fear creeping in or doubt or second guessing, hey, you're a fearless type of player. You need to play that way in order to max out, if we may say. And so I would write that on my wrist. Another thing that I felt was really just natural for me was I would look at the clock, and I would just try to be present. When you look at the clock of the game, you can see it either stopped or ticking down. And I think that's just a reminder to me in that game of focusing on the next play, being present. When you look at a clock tick, at least in my own head, you can't really think of much else. And so it was something that in the heat of a game, I could just look at the clock for a few seconds and it would reset kind of where my mind was at and allow me to really play freely. And so those are probably two exercises that I applied throughout the season that I saw drastic benefits from. And I know there's more out there. I'm also a huge body language guy. I feel like that's part of the communications piece that we spoke on earlier. is really big. And so I try to always be mindful of what my body language was saying non-verbally, and making sure that it was confident as well.
I love that because you mentioned three words: steady, confident, and present. And you kind of described your strategies for those, especially that present one, the clock, and looking at it to help you focus and then kind of refocus. And then being able to look at fearless as a reminder of the behaviors where you play your best, but also it's a reset at times, whether it was a really good play or a really bad play, right? So, what does a fearless Steven Ashworth look like on the court to an observer? Like if we're in the stands, how would somebody say, Steven's playing fearless right now? What do we see?
Yeah, I'd probably say that on the defensive end, I'm fighting through screens, diving on the floor, boxing out bigger individuals, and just really getting after it. Communicating is something that I think, because when you're timid or scared, you're not as willing to speak because you have that fear that you're wrong, or that you're going to say something wrong. And so that would be a fearless Steven on defense. And then on offense, it's being selfless, really not caring if I'm the one to take the shot, but remembering that it's not my shots to take, it's our shots to take as a team. And as a point guard, I take pride in not only being a great shooter, but a great facilitator and making the reads, and playing with a pace, both in the half court and in the full court, that when somebody's watching, they just look and can see the seamless kind of action that's happening in our offense. And that's, once again, there's no doubt when you're moving like that and you can see it, it becomes in a way like poetry with the way the basketball's moving, and shots just seem to go in more when the basketball's moving like that. And that's a state to where I feel like I'm in a fearless mode.
I love that. My favorite part of that is you can be fearless and not take a shot for several minutes. Most athletes can't do that. They decide I haven't taken one in a while, and they decide they're going to create and take a shot, whether it's in the flow. And the thing that I was most proud or impressed watching you, there were a couple of matches against really good teams where you might not have taken a shot for 7 or 8 minutes, and yet the team you impacted winning in a great way. And then, maybe the next 5 minutes you had 5 or 6 straight 3-pointers. But you didn't have to take that shot if it wasn't your shot to take, like you said. And others start to feel like, I need my shot right now. Like I haven't taken one in a while. Why aren't they passing me the ball? And I think that's a really hard skill when you have aspirations to go to the next level too. And you want people to see your stats, and yet I think we're starting to figure out what it looks like. A fearless Steven Ashworth has a lot of different ways to impact winning. And sometimes it is having 8 3-pointers in a game, and sometimes it's 10 assists, and sometimes it's 4 charges that you take on something, and sometimes I am curious about one piece. So you mentioned communication a few times. Can you just give us an example? What's communication? I would say it's not that hard to communicate, but it's really hard to communicate at a high level effectively under stress. What does a high level of communication look like for you on defense? What are the types of things you might be saying either to yourself or to a teammate that says, I'm communicating at a really high level right now?
Yeah, I think there's definitely stages to communication. Communication to me is also very much so built into connection. And so I think that you can become a better communicator the more connected you are with somebody. And so I really like to think about, right, there was a study about Steve Nash and how he was the inferno of connection with the high fives and slapping people on the back and slapping people on the butt, all of those things. And I think that goes towards kind of the first level of communication, is that you have this connection with somebody. And so on the defensive end, I'm communicating to my teammate that a screen is coming, or that I'm there helping them. I'm in the gap, so that they can know that they can get into the basketball a little bit more and the ball handler and pressure him. Because if they get beat, I've already communicated to them that I will be there. And we've spoken on trust. That's another thing that then goes to building trust. And so when you're communicating like that, the guy behind you then also realizes, oh, I can communicate too, because there's things that Steven isn't seeing. And if I can communicate to him, then Steven can communicate to the next guy. And it becomes this chain of communication to where you really become a full team and unit in that. And I think that communication isn't just speaking like words as much as it is the intensity or the intent. And I think if you want to be a great communicator, you also have to have the integrity and the humility to recognize that you might have been the one in the wrong. And so I think there's a lot of times that on the defensive end, if we get scored on, the communication is, what did we do wrong? Not pointing fingers of you needed to be in the gap or you needed to, right? If you're in a ball screen, sometimes you're double teaming the ball handler and maybe we didn't execute that right. But there's always a next stage to where if somebody misses something, somebody else can usually make it up and can help. And so there's the communication piece that it's more we, not me. And all of those things I think are kind of levels of communication to where you really start communicating at a high level. It's verbal, it's nonverbal, but it's an understanding type of communication.
And I love you mentioned nonverbal because when you were talking about Steven Nash, a pretty famous basketball player for the Utah Jazz back in the day, and maybe somebody else.
Phoenix Suns was a long stint.
Phoenix Suns is where he was at the longest, right? So, but I mean, they did a study on him. And he had like over 100, if not more, over 200 high fives a game, where he would continually give them out to people, along with a lot of other nonverbal things that are really powerful. You mentioned confidence more than once. What role does Coach McDermott at Creighton play in affecting confidence for either you or the collective team?
Yeah, Coach Mack has been great at building guys' confidence, and he's very careful about the way that he also corrects, because he knows that can also hinder somebody's confidence. And so we're very selective on offense of the type of shots that we want to shoot. And I think Coach Mack does a really good job of giving us the freedom and trust to be confident in what's a good shot and what's not a good shot. And as a shooter, that's all you want. You want to be able to come down the court, and if you believe it's a good shot, know that on your way back, whether it's a make or a miss, you're not going to hear from the bench saying, don't do that or things like that. Because as a shooter, it's very interesting where the gray, the black, white, and gray comes in, to where a wide open 3-pointer, yes, it's clear as day. You want to shoot that. But then maybe a 15-foot jump shot, open or contested, it's all those things and how much time is on the clock. And you can start to really, your mindset can really take you out of shots very, very quickly. And I think that Coach Mack does a really good job of understanding, how to communicate to his players so that they stay confident, and know that he wants them to take that shot or take that risk or play fearless. And it's been fun to play for someone like that. And I think from me playing for multiple head coaches and a lot of coaching staffs, I think my advice to coaches would just be to understand how to communicate to your players is a huge way in the way that they can respond and perform. And you may or may not even understand as a coach. And I would also add that it doesn't start on the court. It has to start off the court, to understand the way that coaches speak or coaches communicate, or the trust and love that a coach may have for you as an individual and you as a player, to where you can understand their coaching better. And I think Coach Mack does a really good job of that.
Yeah, so many nuggets there, right? But we call that our third ingredient of confidence. The role of teammate or the role of coach can play in either helping or hurting your confidence, right? And so, I mean, you articulated that well. But like you said, in order to do that, you also have to build a relationship, right? You have to, coach has to understand how you tick and vice versa. So that if a coach is a little harsher or comes off wrong or whatever, we know what the intention is versus like, wow, right? So building that communication skill with an athlete, and there's 18 or 20 different athletes on your team, requires a lot of effort from a coach. And a lot of them choose not to do it at a high level. So that's really simple, great advice for coaches for you. All right, so let me just move forward, and as we and then I'll see what other thoughts you might have, but as we wrap up. But all right, you become a father. You mentioned that, right? How has that already changed you as a person, and how do you think that's going to impact you on the court?
Yeah, as a person, I think it just goes one step further to the need to be selfless, and time management, to where, anything I want is has already come second to what, Tommy is my son's name, his needs. And toddlers, they can't communicate, so they're gonna cry, and that's the way they communicate. And he'll let me know when he needs me. And when he needs me, whatever else I wanted to do no longer matters. And so, it's allowed me to really, I once heard from somebody, and I don't know how true it is, but I like it in a way, because it's, we don't have priorities, we have a priority. There's no such thing as priorities, because you can really only be in one place at one time. And so, as a basketball player, I do have a purpose to become the best basketball player I can, and at home I want to be the best father and husband I can. And so, in my life, I try to plan my time accordingly, so that when I'm at home, I can be at home, and when I'm in the court, I can be at the court. Um, and I think that it's allowed me to really be focused and present, like we mentioned on when I look at the clock in a game, to just be present where I'm at. And I think that it allows me to excel, and I've become even better, because in some ways, having, a wife and a loving son to come home to, that he doesn't care if I made three threes or no threes. He's excited to see dad. And it's been, a lot of fun, and a joy that I've experienced, that I hope everybody who wants to gets to experience it someday.
Love that. Priority. I love that. Helps us stay present, be where our feet are, and just another mindfulness strategy that helps you in volleyball or basketball, volleyball, softball, or life, right? I mean, so all right.
Pickleball, golf, all the hobbies I want to do outside of
Oh,
basketball.
I heard you're a good golfer too, potentially, or at least there's good golfers in your family, I hear. So what's next for you here? I mean, obviously you've got a year coming up. What are you looking for yourself in terms of growing and being a little different than you were last year? Where do you see that growth taking place?
Yeah, realistically, obviously you can think through, just the productivity that we're going to be losing with two fantastic players, friends and teammates in Baylor and Trey, um, going to the next level. And then you also throw in some transfers that we had that have left, that had an impact on our team. And then, Francisco Farabello, who's also left. And so there's some production that I realistically see that I have an opportunity, and also, a need for the team to, contribute more to in some of those spaces. And so, this offseason, I've tried to prepare myself to be ready for any of those moments, and, to make sure that I can excel in different situations and scenarios. But then, with all of that, reminding myself that my greatest ability is leading a group to win games, and remembering that whatever it takes to win, I'm willing to do. I think that I saw that all the way through my middle school years to high school to now college, is that if the team needs me to have 7 rebounds, I need to go get 7 rebounds. If the team needs me to have 10 assists, I'll try to get 10 assists. Whatever the team needs me to do to win is where I see my greatest asset, to the team being. And when there's aspirations of playing at the next level, I think that winning answers a lot of questions. And so, first and foremost, this upcoming season, is the goal to win every single game we play. And that's not an easy task, but, winning cures a lot. And so, if I can just be making sure that I attribute to winning in whatever form the team needs, I'm going to be really, really happy with how this year goes.
I love that. One of the things I've observed in Steven, as I wrap up my piece, I'll see if Scott's got a question, which is the percentage of times that you impact winning plays, either involved in making the alley-oop, making the defensive rebound and running in transition, making the extra pass, making the shot, taking the charge. Like when you look at winning plays or impacting winning, there's only been a couple of people where I really watched Creighton over the years going, he seems to be involved in almost every play in some capacity on the winning plays. And whether it's an assist, a rebound, running in transition, getting open, making the extra pass, whatever it is, That's really what stood out to me when I think about you last year when you were playing your best or fearless basketball. That you always seem to be involved in a productive play somehow. And I think that's just a testament to everything he's described. Scott?
Yeah, I just have one question on what advice would you give to younger athletes about mindset and confidence?
Yeah, to younger athletes, I think that as we've talked about with maxing out, is find as many resources as you can, be vulnerable, and don't be afraid to improve. Because I think a lot of athletes don't reach their full potential because they're too afraid to turn over the rocks and understand what might be lying under them and realize the problems that they might need to fix. And there's going to be attributes and talents that God may have not blessed you with, but there's a work ethic and a determination that can overcome that. And if you're listening to this, if you hear this, I hope that I'm in some way a living testimony of work ethic and hard work. And if I, at 6'1" in shoes, can play at the highest level of Division I basketball, you can accomplish your goals as well. And I think my last final advice to you guys would be to believe in yourself, believe in others, believe in your teammates. And if you really want to accomplish your goals, write them down, because when you see them every day on a piece of paper, you're going to make sure that you work towards achieving them. And I'd also say don't be afraid to tell others your goals, because like I've done on the podcast today, telling everybody who listens I want to play in the NBA, I'm holding myself to a standard and a work ethic to try and achieve that. And really, you're going to be grateful for the work ethic you put in, whether you're achieving the goal you set out to achieve or not. I promise you, you will be successful in whatever you do.
What a great message, huh?
Yeah.
And really what he's saying is when you're done, whether you've reached that goal or not, you don't want to have any regrets. Like there are times that we don't always reach our goal, and there's a difference between putting ourselves in a position to max out. And sometimes we do fall short. That's called life. That's called sport. But most of us also know, if we're being honest with ourselves, when we fell short because of things we had control over, then we tend to have the pain of regret. And so he's really just saying is you leave it all out there and you chase your dream and you speak it into existence, and it changes the odds in your favor. But no matter what, we always can't predict the future. We want to have no regrets when a season is over, whether a career is over, a journey is over, when our kid leaves for college, all those things, which you have a long time for that, Steven. But wow, we've covered.
Don't blink though, right? Don't blink.
Don't blink. It happens quick. Trust me. And glad we've enjoyed talking to you tonight, Steven. Do you have any last thoughts for us, or any other things that you want to share?
No, I think it was great. Such a good conversation to speak with you guys. It's fun to always reflect on, past seasons and past experiences that you've had. And it's also a good reminder to talk about these things for myself as I come into this new season. So I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, we really appreciate you. Fearless comparison is the thief of joy, and learning how to be your true self and just play fearless. Those two things, along with being steady, confident, and present, like you don't have to do a lot of things right if you pair that with good preparation and work ethic. So like Steven said, put yourself in a position to reach your goals. So thank you so much, Steven, for being on the Max Out Mindset podcast.
Thank you.
Physical abilities such as strength, speed, agility, endurance, and coordination are fundamental in sports. But mental abilities such as focus, concentration, motivation, confidence, resilience, and decision-making can heavily influence an athlete's performance, especially when it matters the most. If you want the mental edge in sport and life, check out the Max Out Mindset for Volleyball book and workbook, or the Max Out Mindset for Softball book and workbook. A guide for coaches, athletes, teams, and parents to help you be in the best position to max out when it matters the most. Go to www.maxoutmindset.com.